2:14 a.m. County Road 9. The thin mist rises from the Black River like smoke from a dying campfire, clinging to the steel bones of the old two-lane bridge. The asphalt beneath the crossing hums with a low mechanical prayer hazard lights blinking. Amber against the fog, rhythmic as a heartbeat, steady as a lie. A silver SUV sits abandoned at the bridge's mouth, driver's door hanging open like a broken wing. The dome light spills yellow warmth over the interior, illuminating a child's backpack slumped against the passenger seat, dinosaurs grinning across faded fabric. In the cup holder, a thermos of coffee still carries heat when the first deputies arrive, steam curling from the lip like a final breath. The keys dangle from the ignition, swaying slightly in the river breeze, that no footprints lead toward the water. No scuff marks scar the bridge rail. No bodies float in the Black River's slow-moving current. Mark Delaney, 34, insurance adjuster and Little League coach, has simply vanished. His son Ethan, 8 years old, gap-toothed and shy, has disappeared with him into the fog-heavy night. The scene feels wrong from the first moment, too clean, too arranged. Deputy Martinez circles the SUV twice before calling it in, her flashlight beam catching details that don't add up. The perfect placement of Mark's wallet on the dashboard, the way the hazard lights pulse in perfect sync, the child's juice box, standing upright on the floor mat without a single dent. It's as if someone staged the abandonment, arranged the props for maximum impact. Looks like they went into the river, Martinez tells the responding sergeant, but her voice carries down. Maybe the dad snapped, took the kid with him. Murder-suicide. The sergeant nods, scribbling notes on a waterlogged pad. By morning, the theory has hardened into fact. Mark Delaney, facing financial ruin in a bitter custody battle, drove his son to the bridge and walked them both into the Black River's embrace. The SUV gets towed. The case gets filed. The town moves on, but rivers don't always keep their secrets. And some disappearances are designed to look like drownings. 23. Years pass. The bridge gets repainted twice. New guardrails installed after a drunk driver clips the old ones. County Road 9 carries its daily traffic of commuters and long-haul truckers, none of them thinking about the father and son who vanished on a foggy night in 1997. The Black River keeps flowing, carrying debris and sediment toward the larger waterways. That will eventually reach the sea. Then the drought comes. Summer 2020 arrives with the worst dry spell in county records. The Black River shrinks to a trickle, exposing mudflats and gravel bars that haven't seen sunlight in decades. Kids wade in spots that used to swallow fishing boats. Old-timers point out landmarks, the submerged oak where they used to tie rope. Swings, the concrete foundations of a mill that burned down in 1905 Dot. It's a kayaker who spots the bone jutting from a silt bank 2 miles downstream from the bridge. Clean and white against the black mud, obviously human. The femur measures 34 inches, consistent with an adult male. Wrapped around it like a burial shroud, the remains of blue jeans, Levi's 501s, still carrying threads of the original denim weave. But it's the rib cage that changes everything. Dr. Sarah Chun, the county's medical examiner, runs her gloved finger along the 7th rib, tracing a groove that cuts clean through the bone. The mark is precise, deliberate, a straight line that enters from the right side and angles upward toward the heart. Under the microscope, the edges show the distinctive beveled cut of a sharp blade, probably a hunting knife or fixed blade tactical knife with a 7 to 8 inch cutting edge. This wasn't a drowning, Chong tells Detective Claire Norris, holding the bone fragment up to the examination light. Mark Delaney was stabbed. Single thrust, probably fatal within minutes. The blade caught the rib as it penetrated. Claire studies the photographs spread across Sean's desk, the arranged SUV, the pristine thermos, the child's backpack that looked like it had been carefully positioned for maximum emotional impact. Details that felt wrong in 1997 now scream. Their wrongness, the missing footprints, the perfect staging, the way every piece of evidence pointed toward the water. Someone wanted us to think they drowned, Claire says, voicing what every cop on the original case had felt but couldn't prove. They staged the whole thing. Sean nods. Question is, where's the boy? We've got one body 23 years later. That means either Ethan Delaney's remains are somewhere else, ... She pauses, letting the alternative hang in the air like smoke. Or he didn't die that night. The implications hit Claire like cold water. An 8-year-old witness to his father's murder. If Ethan Delaney survived that night on County Road 9, he's been living with the knowledge of what really happened for more than 2 decades. And if he's still alive, he might be the only person who can identify his father's killer. But survival comes with its own questions. Where has Ethan been all these years? Who's been keeping him hidden? And why, after 23 years of silence, are his father's bones finally surfacing from the Black River's muddy depths? Claire reopens the case file, spreading the faded photographs and witness statements across her desk. The original investigation was thorough but narrow, focused entirely on the murder-suicide theory. Deputies interviewed Mark's business partner, his ex-wife, his neighbors, and co-workers. Everyone agreed Mark Delaney was a good man facing bad circumstances, the kind of pressure that might drive someone to desperate actions. But they never looked for signs of outside involvement, never considered that someone else might have arranged the scene at County Road 9, never asked why a man planning to kill himself and his son would leave the hazard lights blinking. As if calling for help, Claire's phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. You won't find him in the river. The message arrives at 2:14 a.m., exactly 23 years to the minute after. Mark Delaney's SUV was found abandoned on the bridge. Claire scrolls through the old case files and finds the same words, typed on a witness statement from 1997. An anonymous tip called into the department's hotline, dismissed as crank commentary from someone following the news coverage. Now the message feels different. Not like a random tip, but like a warning or a confession. Someone's been watching. Someone's been waiting. And now that Mark Delaney's bones have emerged from their river grave, that someone is ready to finish the story that started on a foggy 1997. The question is whether Claire can solve a 23-year-old murder before the killer decides to add a few more bodies to the Black River's collection. Detective Claire Norris had been a rookie deputy in 1997, fresh out of the academy and assigned to traffic patrol when the call came in about the abandoned SUV on County Road 9. She'd been first on scene after Martinez had helped string the crime scene tape and direct traffic around the bridge while the investigators worked. The memories stayed with her through 2 decades of police work. The eerie quiet of that foggy morning, the way the river seemed to swallow sound, the feeling that something crucial was hiding just beyond the reach of their flashlight beams. Now, she stands on the same bridge as a 15-year veteran detective, studying crime scene photos that reveal details her rookie eyes had missed. The SUV's position bothered her, then parked at an angle that blocked one lane of traffic but left the other clear, as if the driver wanted to ensure maximum visibility for anyone passing by. The hazard lights had been blinking when Martinez arrived, but the engine was off and the keys were in the ignition. You don't turn off the engine if you're planning to drive yourself into the river. Someone wanted this car found quickly, Claire tells her partner, Detective Ray Vega, as they walk the bridge deck in the early morning light. They staged it for maximum impact concern citizen calls, 911. First responders arrive. Everyone assumes the worst. Vega nods, studying the guardrail. But why make it look like murder-suicide? Why not just make them disappear completely? Claire considers this. Because a missing person case stays open indefinitely. Bodies never found. Families never get closure. Media keeps asking questions. But murder-suicide? Case closed in a month. Everyone stops looking. They drive to the county morgue, where Dr. Chun has Mark Delaney's remains arranged on an examination table. In the fluorescent lighting, the bones look almost clean 23 years in river silt, and stripped away most traces of flesh and fabric, leaving only the essential architecture of a man who died violently in his prime. The wound track tells us everything, Sean explains, indicating the damaged rib. Blade entered here, angled upward at approximately 30 degrees. Based on the penetration depth and the angle, your killer was shorter than the victim, probably 5'6" to 5'8" and right-handed. The thrust came from below, suggesting Merck was standing when he was stabbed, possibly turned away from his attacker. Claire studies the crime scene photos again. Mark Delaney had been 6'1", a weekend warrior who coached his son's baseball team and played pickup basketball at the YMCA. Not an easy man to overpower, even for someone with a knife. How do you get close enough to stab someone that tall without a struggle? Someone he trusted, Vega suggests, or someone who caught him off guard. Seschin picks up a magnifying glass and points to fine scratches on the rib surface. There are hesitation marks, here shallow cuts that preceded the fatal wound. Your killer wasn't a professional. This was personal, emotional. Someone who knew Mark Delaney well enough to hate him. Claire pulls out the original case file and spreads the witness statements across Chan's desk. A 1997 investigation had focused on Mark's financial troubles. His insurance adjustment business was failing. He was behind on child support, facing a custody battle with his ex-wife Jennifer. But the interviews revealed other pressures. A business partnership that had turned sour, whispered affairs that had made enemies, a pattern of small betrayals that had accumulated over time. Look at this, Claire says, pointing to a statement. From Mark's business partner, David Brennan. He admits they had a heated argument the day before Mark disappeared. Something about missing money from a client settlement. Vega reads over her shoulder. $10,000 in insurance money. That was supposed to go to a client named Morrison. Mark claimed he'd already sent the check, but Morrison never received it. That's motive for a business dispute, Claire says. But is it motive for murder? The deeper they dig into Mark's life, the more complicated the picture becomes. Jennifer. Delaney describes a man under enormous pressure, drinking too much, making increasingly erratic decisions. His neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, reports seeing Mark arguing with someone in his driveway. 2 nights before he disappeared, she couldn't see who, but heard raised voices and a car door slamming. Did she describe the car? Vega asks. Claire flips through the witness statements. Green pickup truck, older model, rusted around the wheel wells. She'd seen it in the neighborhood before, but couldn't remember when. They spend the afternoon tracking down everyone from the original investigation. David Brennan is now selling real estate in Tampa. His memory of 1997 clouded by years and alcohol. He admits to the argument about the missing money, but insists it was resolved Mark had found the check stuck between his desk drawers, never deposited. He was disorganized, not dishonest, Brennan tells them over the phone. I was angry at the time, sure, but not angry enough to kill him. Jesus, we're talking about 10 grand, not 10 million. Jennifer Delaney, now Jennifer Morrison, after remarrying, agrees to meet them at a coffee shop near her home in suburban Cleveland. She's aged well. Claire thinks still attractive at 51, but carrying the weight of 2 decades, spent wondering what happened to her son. I know what everyone thought, Jennifer says, stirring sugar into her coffee with mechanical precision. That Mark snapped, that the pressure got to him, that he took Ethan to the bridge, and ... She doesn't finish the sentence. But Mark would. Never hurt Ethan. Never. He loved that boy more than anything in the world. Tell us about the custody battle, Vega says gently. Jennifer's jaw tightens. It wasn't really a battle. Mark was behind on support payments, yes, but he was trying to catch up. I wasn't trying to keep him from seeing Ethan. We'd worked out a schedule that gave him weekends and holidays. The night he disappeared, Ethan was supposed to stay over for the weekend. Who else knew about that arrangement? Claire asks. Anyone who paid attention, I suppose. Mark's neighbors, people at Ethan's school, the other Little League parents. It wasn't a secret. Claire shows her the crime scene photos, not the disturbing ones, just images of the SUV's interior. Does anything look wrong to you here? Jennifer studies the photos for a long moment. Ethan's backpack, she says finally. He never traveled without his Game Boy. I bought it for his 8th birthday 2 months before. Well, before. He carried it everywhere. Drove Mark crazy with the beeping sounds. But I don't see it in any of these pictures. Claire and Vega exchange glances. The Game Boy isn't mentioned in any of the evidence logs. Either Ethan left it at home that night, unlikely, according to his mother, or someone removed it from the scene. What else is missing? Claire asks. Jennifer points to the thermos in the cup holder. Mark drank his coffee black. No sugar, no cream. But this thermos is light blue. Mark's was red, with the Cleveland Indians logo. He got it at the stadium when we took Ethan to his first game. Another detail that doesn't fit. Claire makes a note to check whether the thermos was ever processed for fingerprints. If someone staged the scene, they might have brought their own props and left their own prints. They drive back to the bridge as evening approaches, the fog already beginning to rise from the Black River surface. Claire parks in the same spot, where Mark's SUV had been found, turns on the hazard lights, and steps out into the gathering mist. The bridge feels different at this hour, more isolated, more threatening. Cars pass sporadically, their headlights sweeping across the guardrails, before disappearing into the fog. Perfect place for a handoff, Vega observes, or a confrontation. Remote enough for privacy, public enough that screams might not carry far. Claire walks to the guardrail and looks down at the river 20 feet below. In 1997, the water level had been higher, the current stronger after a wet autumn. A body thrown from this height would have been carried downstream quickly, probably surfacing miles away if it surfaced at all. The killer had counted on the river to hide the evidence forever, but they hadn't counted on drought, hadn't counted on Mark Delaney's bones eventually emerging from their muddy grave, hadn't counted on a rookie deputy remembering details that didn't fit, questions that never got asked. Claire's phone buzzes. Another text from the unknown number. The boy saw everything. This time, Claire is ready. She immediately calls the phone company's emergency line, requesting an urgent trace on. The incoming message. A customer service representative puts her on hold, then comes back with disappointing news. The text originated from a prepaid phone purchased with cash, activated at a convenience store in downtown Cleveland 3 days ago. No security cameras. No records of the buyer's identity. But the phone is still active, the rep tells her. If they send another message, they might be able to triangulate the location. Claire stares at the text message, reading it again. The boy saw everything. Not would have seen, or might have seen. Present tense, as if Ethan Delaney is still alive somewhere, still watching, still carrying the memory of his father's murder. She calls Dr. Chun. How long would it take you to process DNA from a child's toothbrush? If you can get me a sample, 48 hours for a preliminary match, Chun says. Why? Because I think we might need to compare it to a living person. Claire spends that evening at the county library, scrolling through microfilm records of the local newspaper's coverage from 1997-1998. The Delaney disappearance made front-page news for 3 weeks, then gradually moved to the inner pages as other stories took precedence. But buried in a brief follow-up story from December 1997, she finds something that makes her sit up straight. Asterisk. Local boy reported missing from quarry area, reads the headline. The article is only 3 paragraphs long, describing how a hunter had spotted a child in pajamas walking along the access road to the old Garrison quarry, about 15 miles east of the bridge. The boy had fled when approached, disappearing into the woods before the hunter could get a good look at his face. A search of the area found no trace of the child, and authorities dismissed the sighting as either a mistake or an unrelated runaway, who had since returned home. But Claire recognizes the date, December 15th, 1997, 3 months after Mark and Ethan Delaney had disappeared from County Road 9. She prints the article and drives to the quarry the next morning. The facility had closed in the early 2000s, leaving behind a man-made lake surrounded by limestone cliffs and equipment yards full of rusting machinery. A chain-link fence topped with barbed wire surrounds the property, but decades of weather have opened gaps that would easily admit a child dot at the quarry office. Now just a trailer with broken windows and graffitied sides. Claire finds a mailbox full of forwarding addresses for the company that used to own the site. But more interesting is the small house tucked into the woods beyond the office, its yard cluttered with the kind of mechanical debris that suggests someone still lives here. She knocks on the door. No answer, but she can see movement behind the curtains. A face appears briefly at the window guard, bearded, older than she expected, then disappears again. Mr. Garrison? Claire calls out, remembering the name from property records. I'm Detective Norris with the County Sheriff's Office. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the quarry. The door opens a crack, revealing a man in his 70s, with suspicious eyes and hands that shake slightly with age or nerves. Albert Garrison, according to his driver's license, had been the quarry's caretaker for 30 years before its closure. After the company went bankrupt, he'd simply stayed, living rent-free in exchange for keeping vandals and scrappers away from the equipment. What kind of questions? Garrison asks through the crack in the door. Claire shows him the newspaper article. A hunter report had seen a child near here in 1997. Do you remember anything about that? Garrison's reaction is immediate and telling a full-body flinch, as if someone had struck him. Lot of kids used to come around, he says quickly. Swimming in the quarry, riding bikes on the access roads. I ran them off when I could. This would have been different, Claire says. December, middle of winter. A boy in pajamas. I don't remember, but Garrison's eyes say otherwise. They dart toward the woods behind his house, then back to Claire's face, then away again. Classic. Signs of deception, the kind of tells that every cop learns to recognize. Claire thanks him and walks back to her car, but instead of leaving, she parks at the end of the access road, and watches the house through binoculars. Within 10 minutes, Garrison emerges from his back door and disappears into the woods, following a path that's invisible from the road, but clearly well used. Claire gives him a 5-minute head start, then follows. The path leads to a clearing, about a quarter-mile from Garrison's house, where someone has built a small shack from scavenged lumber and corrugated metal. The structure is barely large enough for one person, with a single window covered by a sheet of plastic and a door that hangs crooked on improvised hinges. Claire approaches carefully, her hand resting on her service weapon. The shack appears empty, but fresh footprints in the mud around the door suggest recent use. She peers through the plastic window and sees something that makes her stomach clench. Scratches in the wooden walls, hundreds of them, as if someone had been marking time, and carved into the soft timber near what might have been a sleeping area. "I want Mom." She calls for backup, then searches the shack while waiting for Vega and the crime scene team to arrive. Hidden under a loose floorboard, she finds a child's blue sneaker with a peeling baseball sticker, Cleveland Indians, the same team logo that would have been on Mark Delaney's missing thermos. The shoe is small, probably a size 3, consistent with what an 8-year-old boy would wear. But it's the notebook that changes everything. Wrapped in a plastic bag to protect it from moisture, the composition book contains hundreds of entries, written in a child's handwriting that gradually matures over time. The early entries are simple. Day 17 cold. Hungry. Albert says Dad went away. Later entries show increasing sophistication. Day 89. I want Mom, but Albert says the bad men will. Find me if I leave. He brings food and blankets. Says I have to stay hidden. Claire flips through the pages, watching the progression of years in the changing handwriting, the gradual shift from childish observations to more complex thoughts. Day 5,000 watching is better than being seen. A lady cop came today. Albert was scared, but she left. I could have called out, but what if she doesn't believe me? What if the bad men find out? Day 5,000. Claire does the math. Roughly 13 and a half years. If Ethan Delaney had been brought to this shack in late 1997, Day 5,000 would put him in his early 20s. Still alive. Still hiding in the woods around Garrison Quarry. The final entry is dated 3 days ago. The bones came up from the river. They'll start looking now. Albert says we might have to run, but I'm tired of running. Tired of hiding. Maybe it's time to let them find me. Vega arrives with the crime scene team, and they spend the rest of the day processing the shack. They find evidence of long-term habitation, multiple layers of bedding, canned food dating back years, books and magazines that suggest someone had been regularly supplied with reading material. On the wall near the window, they discover something else. A collection of baseball cards, each one carefully mounted and dated. The newest card, a 2020 rookie, sits on the windowsill like it had been placed there recently. He's still around. Claire tells Vega as they examine the shack's contents. Still coming back here, still leaving signs. The question is where he's living now. They bring Albert Garrison in for questioning, but the old man lawyers up immediately. His attorney, a sharp-dressed woman from Cleveland, makes it clear that her client won't be answering questions without a grant of immunity from prosecution. Immunity. For what? Claire asks. The attorney's smile is thin. That depends on what you're prepared to offer, detective. My client has information about the Delaney case, but he's also concerned about his own legal exposure. Claire and Vega confer with the prosecutor's office. The situation is delicate. If Albert Garrison helped hide Ethan Delaney for 23 years, he could be charged with kidnapping, child endangerment, obstruction of justice. But if Ethan was in genuine danger, if someone really had killed his father and was still looking for him, then Garrison might have saved the boy's life. While they negotiate with Garrison's lawyer, Claire returns to the quarry after dark, hoping to spot signs of recent activity. She parks near the closed gates and walks the perimeter fence, following tire tracks that lead to a section where the chain link has been cut and bent back. The opening is large enough for a person to squeeze through, with fresh scratches on. The metal that suggests regular use dot inside the quarry grounds. Claire follows a path through the equipment yard toward the flooded quarry pit itself. The moon is nearly full, casting silver light across the water and the limestone cliffs that rise 40 feet above the surface. It's beautiful and eerie, the kind of place that would appeal to someone who'd spent his childhood hiding in the woods. Movement catches her eye a figure standing on the cliff edge, silhouetted against the night sky. Too far away to make out details, but the posture suggests someone young, maybe in his 20s or 30s. Claire calls out, identifying herself as police, but the figure disappears immediately into the darkness. She climbs the rough path to the cliff top, but finds only footprints in the muddy ground. Fresh prints made by expensive running shoes. Someone had been watching the quarry, and probably watching her. Claire's phone buzzes with another text. Meet me at the bridge tomorrow night, 2:14 a.m. Come alone, or I disappear forever. This time, she's ready with the tracing software, but the result is the same. Prepaid phone, cash purchase, no usable leads. The message comes from somewhere in the quarry area, confirming her suspicion that Ethan Delaney, if that's who's been sending the texts, is still in the area. Still watching, still waiting for the right moment to reveal himself. But Claire isn't. Willing to meet an unknown subject alone at a crime scene in the middle of the night. Instead, she calls in a surveillance team and positions them around the bridge before the appointed time. If Ethan shows up, they'll be ready to talk. If it's someone else the killer, perhaps trying to lure her into a trap, they'll be ready for that 2 dot at 2:13 a.m. Claire parks her unmarked car at the same spot where Mark Delaney's SUV had been, found 23 years earlier. The fog is lighter tonight, but the bridge still feels isolated, cut off from the world by mist and darkness. She can see the surveillance team's vehicles positioned at both ends of the bridge, but their occupants are invisible in the shadows. Asterisk at exactly 2:14, a figure emerges from the fog on the far side of the bridge. Tall and lean, wearing dark clothes, and moving with the careful steps of someone who spent years staying hidden. Claire gets out of her car slowly, keeping her hands visible, making no sudden movements that might spook him. "Ethan?" she calls out. "Is that you?" The figure stops, about 50 feet away, just at the edge of her vision. "You're the cop from the quarry," a voice says. Adult male, maybe 30 years old, with a flat accent of northern Ohio. "You found my hiding place." "I'm Detective Norris," Claire says, taking a step forward. "I've been looking into what happened to your father." "I know what happened to my father." The voice carries 23 years of pain and anger. "I was there. I saw the whole thing." Claire feels a chill that has nothing to do with the river fog. "Who killed him, Ethan?" A long pause. The figure shifts in the darkness, and Claire catches a glimpse of a face that might be Mark Delaney's features, aged by more than 2 decades of hard living. "The question isn't who killed him," Ethan says. "The question is why it took you so long to figure out he was murdered." Before Claire can respond, the surveillance team's radio crackles to life. "Detective, we've got movement on the south end of the bridge." 2 subjects approach him on foot. Claire spins around and sees headlights cutting through the fog, moving fast toward the bridge. Not police vehicles, these are driving without lights until they get close, then switching on high. Beams that turn the bridge into a stage. Claire hears Ethan curse behind her, then the sound of running footsteps heading away from the bridge. The first vehicle stops about 100 yards from Claire's position, and two men get out. Both are armed. She can see the rifles outlined against their headlights. The second vehicle moves to block the other end of the bridge, trapping her in the middle. "Detective Norris," a voice calls out. "Step away from your vehicle and put your hands where we can see them." Claire recognizes the voice from somewhere, but can't place it in the adrenaline rush of the moment. She reaches for her radio to call for backup, but stops when she realizes the surveillance team should have moved by now. Either they're positioning themselves for a tactical advantage, or something's gone wrong with the operation. "Who are you?" Claire shouts back. "Identify yourselves." "We're the people who've been cleaning up this mess for 23 years, the voice says. "And we're not going to let some small-town detective fuck it up now." A rifle shot echoes across the bridge, and Claire feels concrete chips spray against her legs as the bullet hits the guardrail next to her. She draws her service weapon and takes cover behind her car, trying to get a clear view of the shooters. But the headlights blind her, turning everything beyond their glare into impenetrable darkness. Another shot, this one closer. Claire keys. Her radio. "Officer down. Shots fired on County Road 9 bridge. Request immediate backup." The radio crackles with static, then goes dead. Someone's jamming the frequencies. Claire is trapped on the bridge with at least 2 armed subjects, no backup, and no way to call for help. She can only hope that Ethan escaped into the woods, and that someone at the station will notice when she fails to check in. But as more shots ring out in the fog-heavy night, Claire realizes that her investigation into a 23-year-old murder has led her into something much larger and more dangerous than she ever imagined. Someone has been protecting Mark Delaney's killer all these years. Someone with resources, with connections, with the ability to jam police radio frequencies and coordinate a tactical operation on a county bridge in the middle of the night. The question is whether she'll live long enough to find out who they are. The muzzle flash cuts through fog like lightning, and Claire rolls behind the bridge's steel support beam as another rifle shot sparks off concrete. She counts at least 3 shooters now too, at the south end of the bridge where the vehicles are positioned, and a third somewhere in the darkness beyond the north approach. Professional spacing, coordinated fire, military-style tactics. This isn't some desperate cover-up by a small-town killer. This is an execution squad. Claire's radio remains dead, the jamming signal creating nothing but static on all frequencies. Her cell phone shows no bars, not unusual in this river valley, but suspicious given the timing. Someone has thought this through, planned for every contingency except the one that matters most. Ethan Delaney is still alive, still watching, still carrying the truth about what happened 23 years ago. A new voice echoes across the bridge, younger than the first, with a slight southern accent. "Detective, you need to understand something. Your investigation ends here. Walk away now. File a report saying the case is unsolvable, and everyone goes home safe." "Including the man who killed Mark Delaney?" Claire shouts back, trying to pinpoint the speaker's location. Laughter, cold and bitter. Mark Delaney was a problem that got solved permanently, just like you're about to be if you don't listen to reason. Claire peers around the steel beam and sees movement near the vehicles. Someone's advancing along the bridge deck, using the guardrail for cover. She has maybe 30 seconds, before they reach a position where her hiding spot won't protect her. Time to make a choice. Surrender and hope they let her live, or fight with insufficient ammunition against superior numbers and equipment. Then she hears something that changes everything. The distant howl of sirens, growing closer. Multiple vehicles, emergency lights strobing through the fog. Either the surveillance team has finally moved, or someone at the station got worried when Claire failed to check in. The rifle fire stops abruptly. Claire hears shouted orders. Engines. Starting, the screech of tires on asphalt as the vehicles at the south end of the bridge begin to retreat. But one of the shooters is still advancing along the guardrail, now less than 50 feet from her position. Claire takes a deep breath, steps out from behind the steel beam, and aims her weapon at the approaching figure. "Police! Drop your weapon!" The figure freezes, and in the headlight glare, Claire can finally see his face. Ray Vega, her partner of 3 years, the man who'd helped her reopen the Delaney case and process the evidence from Garrison Quarry. His rifle is pointed directly at her chest. Ray? Claire keeps her weapon trained on him, but her voice betrays her confusion. What the hell is going on? Vega's smile is sad and tired. "You're a good cop, Claire. Too good. You should have left. This case buried where we found it." "We found it?" "Ray, you've been helping me investigate. I've been managing your investigation," Vega corrects. "Making sure you found what we wanted you to find when we wanted you to find it. The bone in, the river, the evidence at Garrison's shack, even the text messages. All carefully orchestrated to bring us to this point." Claire feels the ground shifting beneath her feet. "The text messages were from you? From my people? We've been watching Ethan for years, ever since he stopped hiding at the quarry and started moving around the county. Kid smart, stayed off the grid, but he couldn't resist coming back to check on his old hiding places. We've had cameras in those woods for a decade. The sirens are getting closer, maybe 3 minutes out. Claire needs to keep Vega talking until backup arrives, but she also needs to understand what she's walked into. Who are your people, Ray? Who killed Mark Delaney?" Vega glances toward the approaching emergency lights, calculating time and distance. Mark Delaney was laundering money through his insurance business. Small amounts, nothing that would attract federal attention, but enough to make him useful to certain organizations. When he got scared and threatened to expose the operation, he became a liability. "What organizations?" "The kind that don't leave witnesses," Vega says, raising his rifle. "Including cops who ask too many questions." Claire sees his finger move toward the trigger and throws herself sideways as the rifle cracks. The bullet winds past her ear, close enough to feel the heat. She hits the bridge deck hard, rolling toward the opposite guardrail as Vega works the bolt on his rifle. But before he can fire again, another shot echoes across the bridge. This one from the darkness beyond the north approach. Vega staggers, clutching his shoulder, his rifle clattering to the concrete. A figure emerges from the fog, moving with the fluid grace of someone who spent decades staying invisible. Ethan Delaney is 31 years old now, tall like his father, but lean from years of living rough. He carries an old hunting rifle, probably. Something Albert Garrison taught him to use, and his eyes hold the haunted look of someone who's seen too much violence. But his hands are steady as he keeps the rifle trained on Vega. 23 years, Ethan says, his voice carrying across the bridge like a judgment. 23 years I've been waiting for this moment. The emergency vehicles are closer now, their lights visible through the fog. Claire gets to her feet, her service weapon still drawn, but pointed at the ground. She can see Vega trying to reach for his rifle with his good arm, and Ethan adjusting his aim to compensate. Don't, Claire tells Vega. It's over, right? The backup is almost here, and you're wounded. Surrender now, and maybe you'll live through this. Vega's laugh is bitter. You think this ends with me? I'm just middle management, Claire. The people I work for have been running operations in this county for 30 years. They own judges, prosecutors, half the sheriff's department. You think arresting me is going to change anything? Maybe not. Ethan says, taking a step closer, but it'll be a start. Claire looks at him, really looks at him, and sees Mark Delaney's features, aged by trauma and isolation. Ethan, I need you to lower the rifle. Let me handle this. Like you handled it 23 years ago? Ethan's voice is sharp with old anger. Like the whole department handled it when they decided my father killed himself and took me with him. I was a rookie then. I didn't have any authority. You had eyes, Ethan interrupts. You saw the same things I saw that night. The way the sembla. Car was positioned. The missing Game Boy. The wrong thermos. You knew something was off, but you let them close the case anyway. Claire feels the weight of that accusation, the truth of it. She had known something was wrong with the scene at County Road 9, but she'd been young and inexperienced, more concerned with following orders than following her instincts. By the time she'd gained enough rank and experience to matter, the case was ancient history, filed away and forgotten. You're right, she admits. I should have pushed harder, asked more questions, but I can't change what happened then. I can only try to make it right now. The first police car rounds the curve at the south end of the bridge, emergency lights strobing through the fog. Claire recognizes the vehicle Sergeant Martinez, the same deputy who'd been first on scene in 1997. Behind her come two more patrol units and an ambulance, their sirens cutting through the night like prayers for the living. Vega makes one last, desperate reach for his rifle, but Ethan is faster. The hunting rifle barks once more, and Vega's hand explodes in blood and shattered bone. He screams, rolling away from his weapon, clutching the ruined appendage against his chest. That's for my father, Ethan says quietly, then louder, and this is for me. He turns the rifle toward his own head, and Claire realizes with horror that he's planning to end the story the way it began with death on the County Road 9 bridge. 23 years of hiding, of watching, of carrying the weight of witnessing his father's murder have brought him to this moment of final despair. Ethan, no. Claire lunges forward, but she's too far away. The rifle is already pressed against his temple, his finger on the trigger, but the shot doesn't come. Ethan stands frozen, the rifle trembling in his hands, tears streaming down his face. I can't, he whispers. I've been dead for 23 years, but I can't actually die. Claire approaches slowly, her hands visible, her voice gentle. You don't have to die, Ethan. You don't have to disappear again. We can finish this the right way, with justice instead of vengeance. What justice? Ethan's voice cracks. Vega is right. They own half the system. Even if we arrest him, even if he talks, how do we know the prosecutors aren't compromised? How do we know the judge won't be bought? The patrol cars have stopped about 50 yards away, their occupants taking defensive positions behind open doors. Claire can see Martinez speaking into her radio, coordinating with other units, probably calling for negotiators and tactical support. They think they're dealing with a hostage situation or an armed standoff, not a 23-year-old. Murder finally coming to light. Because, Claire says, moving another step closer, this time we have something we didn't have in 1997. We have you, a living witness who saw everything, who can testify about what really happened that night. Ethan's laugh is hollow. Who's going? To believe a man who's been hiding in the woods for 2 decades? Who's going to trust the testimony of someone who was 8 years old when he witnessed a murder? I will, Claire says. And once we get Vega medical attention and into custody, once we start following the money trail and the corruption leads, others will too. This case is going to be impossible to bury this time. Slowly, Ethan lowers the rifle. Not all the way, but enough that Claire can breathe again. What happened that night? She asks. Tell me what you saw. Ethan's eyes focus on something beyond. The bridge, beyond the fog, looking back across more than 2 decades to a scared 8-year-old boy who'd witnessed the unthinkable. Dad got a phone call around 9 o'clock. Someone wanted to meet him at the bridge, said it was about the insurance money he'd been handling. Mom was working late, so he was going to drop me off at Albert's place. First Albert used to babysit sometimes when Dad had business to handle. The story emerges in fragments, interrupted by sirens and a crackle of police radios. But Claire pieces it together. Mark Delaney had indeed been laundering money through his insurance business, but not willingly. Someone had been using his access to client settlements and claim payments to clean cash from drug sales and other criminal enterprises. When Mark discovered what was happening and threatened to go to the authorities, he'd signed his own death warrant. We never made it to Albert's place, Ethan continues. Dad got another call when we were halfway there. Told him to bring me to the bridge instead. Said if he tried to drop me off first, they'd know he was planning something. So we drove too. County Road 9, and Dad parked under the lights like they told him to. Claire listens, mentally comparing Ethan's account to the physical evidence they processed. The staged scene, the wrong thermos, the missing Game Boy, all details that made sense if someone else had arranged the SUV after the murder. There were 2 cars waiting, Ethan says. A green pickup truck and a dark sedan. 3 men got out, and Dad recognized them. I could tell by the way his shoulders tensed up. He told me to stay in the car, lock the doors, don't come out no matter what happened. But you saw what happened. Ethan nods. Dad walked toward them, hands up, trying to look non-threatening. They talked for maybe 5 minutes. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Dad getting more and more agitated. Then one of them, the younger guy, maybe in his 20s, pulled out a knife. Claire glances at Vega, who's sitting against the guardrail now, holding his wounded hand and staring at Ethan with undisguised hatred. Was Vega one of them? Not Ray specifically, Ethan says, but the organization he works for? Yeah, the older guy, the one who did the talking. He's the one who's been sending Ray orders for the last 23 years. The knife attack had been quick and brutal, exactly as Dr. Chun had described from the bone evidence. Mark Delaney had tried to run, but the younger man caught him before he could reach the SUV. The fatal wound had been delivered with clinical precision, designed to stop Mark's heart within minutes, while minimizing blood spatter that might contaminate the crime scene. They dragged Dad to the guardrail and threw him into the river. Ethan says, his voice mechanical now, reciting facts without emotion. Then they came for me. But 8-year-old Ethan Delaney had been smarter and faster than his father's killers. Expected. While they were disposing of Mark's body, he'd slipped out of the SUV and hidden in the tall grass beyond the bridge approach. He'd watched them stage the scene bringing the wrong thermos from one of their vehicles, arranging Mark's wallet on the dashboard, removing Ethan's Game Boy, and other personal items that might complicate the narrative they wanted to create. They spent maybe 20 minutes getting everything perfect, Ethan says, making it look like a murder-suicide, like Dad had snapped and taken me with him. They even turned on the hazard lights, said it would make the car easier to find. Claire does the math. By the time the killers finished staging the scene and left the bridge, Ethan had been alone in the woods for nearly half an hour. A scared 8-year-old boy, having just watched his father's murder, with nowhere to go and no one to trust. He'd done the only thing that made sense. He'd started running. I knew where Albert lived because Dad had taken me there before, Ethan explains. It was maybe 8 miles through the woods, but I'd been camping with Dad plenty of times. I knew how to follow the river, how to stay hidden. Took me most of the night, but I made it to Albert's place just before dawn. Albert Garrison had been a friend of Mark Delaney's, someone who occasionally did odd jobs for Mark's insurance business and who'd babysat Ethan on previous occasions. When a traumatized boy showed up at his door, claiming that his father had been murdered, Albert had faced an impossible choice: call the police and risk having Ethan killed by the same people who'd murdered Mark, or hide the boy and hope the killers would eventually give up looking for him. Albert saved my life, Ethan says. He kept me hidden for 15 years, taught me how to survive in the woods, how to stay off the grid. When I got older, I started moving around the county on my own, but I always came back to check on him. He was the closest thing to family I had left. The ambulance has finally reached the bridge, and paramedics are working on Viga's wounded hand while Claire coordinates with the other officers. She needs to get Ethan's full statement, process the crime scene, and start building the case against whatever criminal organization has been operating in the county for the past 3 decades. But first, she needs to make sure Ethan doesn't disappear again. I need you to come with me, she tells him. Protective custody while we sort this out. If Vega's telling the truth about how deep this corruption goes, you're not safe on your own anymore. Asterisk Ethan looks at the assembled police officers, at the flashing lights and radio chatter and official procedures that represent everything he's been hiding from for 23 years. How do I know you're not part of it? How do I know this isn't just another trap? Claire considers the question. After what Ethan has been through, paranoia isn't a mental illness. It's a survival skill. You don't know, she admits. But right now, I'm the only cop who's been investigating your father's murder instead of covering it up. That has to count for something. She's right, and Ethan knows it. After 23 years of watching from the shadows, he's finally found someone willing to listen to his story and act on it. It's not much, but it's more than he's had since the night his father died on County Road 9. Okay, he says, finally lowering the rifle completely. But I want Albert protected too. If they find out he's been helping me ... Albert's already in protective custody, Claire assures him. We picked him up this afternoon when his lawyer agreed to cooperate. He's safe, and he's ready to corroborate your story. The fog is beginning to lift as dawn approaches, revealing the full extent of the crime scene. Shell casings scattered across the bridge deck, blood stains on the concrete, bullet holes in the guardrails and support beams. It looks like a war zone, which in some ways it has been the final battle in a 23-year conflict between truth and corruption, between justice and expedience. As the crime scene technicians begin their work, Claire walks to the center of the bridge and looks down at the black river flowing beneath. Somewhere in that dark water, Mark Delaney's bones had rested for more than 2 decades before drought, and chance brought them to the surface. But the real truth had been hiding in plain sight all along, carried by a boy who'd grown into a man. While the rest of the world assumed he was dead, Claire's phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for believing him. She looks around, but Ethan is 20 feet away, talking to one of the paramedics. The message comes from a different phone, a different person. Someone else has been watching tonight's events unfold, someone with their own connection to the case. Claire shows the message to Ethan. Any idea who this might be from? Ethan reads the text and nods slowly. Albert always said there were others. Other people who knew Dad was murdered, but were too scared to come forward. Maybe now that the story's finally coming out, they'll find the courage to tell what they know. The sun breaks through the fog as they lead Ethan away from the bridge, painting the river in shades of gold and red. It's been 23 years since Mark and Ethan Delaney drove onto County Road 9, but only one of them is leaving alive. The other will finally get the justice that the river tried so hard to wash away, not in the weeks that follow. Viga's arrest leads to a federal investigation that exposes a criminal network reaching into the highest levels of county government. 3 judges resign, the sheriff retires early, and a dozen law enforcement officers face corruption charges. The drug money laundering operation that Mark Delaney had stumbled into turns out to be just one tentacle of an organization that's been operating in rural Ohio for more than 30 years. Ethan Delaney testifies before a federal grand jury, his childhood memories corroborated by physical evidence and financial records that investigators finally have the authority to access. His story, the 8-year-old boy who witnessed his father's murder and spent 23 years in hiding, becomes national news, a symbol of resilience and the power of truth to survive even when buried in river mud. Albert Garrison receives a suspended sentence in exchange for his cooperation, the court recognizing that his decision to hide Ethan had probably saved the boy's life. He returns to his house near the quarry, where he plants a small garden and teaches Ethan practical skills that don't involve hiding in the woods. Claire gets promoted to lieutenant, but more importantly, she gets the satisfaction of knowing that her instincts as a rookie deputy had been correct. The scene at County Road 9 had never felt right because it wasn't right. Sometimes the questions that don't get asked are more important than the ones that do not. And Ethan Delaney, after 23 years of being officially dead, begins the long process of learning how to live in the world again. He gets a social security number, a driver's license, a job at a hardware store where his mechanical skills and quiet competence make him valuable. He goes to therapy, learns to manage the panic attacks and nightmares that are the price of survival. On quiet evenings, he sometimes drives to County Road 9 and parks near the bridge where his father died. Not to relive the trauma, but to remember that even the darkest secrets eventually surface. That justice delayed isn't always justice denied, and that sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to insist on staying alive. The Black River keeps flowing beneath the bridge, carrying new debris toward the sea, but it no longer carries the weight of Mark Delaney's murder. That burden has finally been lifted from the water and placed where it belongs. On the shoulders of the men who pulled the trigger, swung the knife, and spent 23 years thinking they'd gotten away with murder. They were wrong. Rivers give up their secrets eventually, and so do 8-year-old boys who grow up to be 31-year-old men with perfect memories and the patience to wait for justice. Some stories end with revenge. Some end with tragedy. This one ends with something rarer and more valuable. The truth, finally spoken aloud in a courtroom, where he can do the most good. Ethan Delaney is no longer the boy who disappeared from County Road 9. He's the man who came back to make sure his father's killer would never disappear at all.